The moment we've all been waiting for. Here comes the lady of the play, Lady Macbeth, one of Shakespeare's great characters, one of his great inventions. She's not in the play for many scenes, but every scene she's in is absolutely incredible. And this introductory scene is one of the best of all. Don't forget to like this video and to subscribe to the channel so that you can find out the next time I post a video in my analysis of Macbeth. And also subscribe to my platform where you will be able to do an AI tutor activity which will take you through a series of questions connected to everything we've discussed in this video so that you can test your knowledge. I really recommend doing those AI activities. They're really going to make that knowledge stick. You can find the link to my platform in the description below. Before we go any further, let's just discover a little bit about the traditional expectations of women in that time. I've got some quotations from a couple of well-known texts from the 16th to 17th century about the expectations for gender roles. Cover your ears now if there's anything that believes in gender equality in you at all, because you're just not going to like this. Woman is an excellent ornament of men, since she is granted to man not only to procreate children, but also in possession and, as it were, in dominion, over which man may exercise his jurisdiction and authority. That's a well-known text there saying about how the woman is an ornament, like almost a thing, sort of subhuman, but also something that a man can control. Another key text of the time describes women in this way. A man in his natural perfection is fierce, hardy, strong. The good nature of a woman is to be mild, timorous, tractable, benign. There you go, mild, kind of soft, timorous, fearful, tractable, sort of bending to the man's will. And good is a notable word as well there, expected to be a good person. So you get the idea. The man's in charge, the man's the fierce one, the woman is the meek, the mild, the good one, the ornament, the possession of the man. Okay, so now we've dealt with all that gender inequality, let's see how much Lady Macbeth fits the mould. Well, from our first impressions, we may well think she fits the mould. She is in the domestic setting. She's reading a letter. She hasn't been out in the battle. She has to find out about the battle by her husband telling her what's happened. In fact, the first words we hear from her mouth are the words of her husband because she's reciting his letter out loud. So the woman is talking with her husband's voice, and that really sets her up as someone who fulfills that traditional gender role. But no sooner has she finished the letter from her husband than the expectations of her gender role are turned on their head completely. In fact, right from her first line. How's she going to respond to this news that her husband's telling her about how he's been talking to witches and they've been prophesying that he's going to be king? Remember, it shook him up a bit. He was kind of shocked and his hair stood up and his heart beat fast. Nothing of the sort with her. In fact, immediately she says, "Glams thou art, and cawdor, and shalt be what thou art promised." That shalt there is a very strong modal verb. It implies her determination. It implies her ambition right from the word go. And then she starts criticising her husband for being too much of a good guy. "Yet I do fear thy nature. It is too full of the milk of human kindness to catch the nearest way." What's she saying there? She's already thinking about murder. She's thinking about catching the nearest way to kingship, which means killing somebody. But she says her husband's nature is too full of the milk of human kindness, an incredibly famous phrase from the play. If you think about milk, first of all, you think about femininity, don't you? You think about mother's milk. You also think about purity. The colour white implies purity. And you think about innocence because babies drink milk and children drink milk. So we've got this image of purity and innocence and femininity, which she detects as being a weakness in her husband. She, the woman, is calling her husband more feminine and weaker than her, which really inverts the gender expectations for the Jacobean audience. He's too full of the milk of human kindness. Shouldn't it be her that's too full of the milk of human kindness? She then goes on to name her husband as being ambitious, which links with what we were talking about in Act 1, Scene 4. But she sees him as not having the illness that should accompany his ambition. So in her mind, if you're going to be ambitious, you have to be ill or hear evil. Ambition and evil are linked in her mind. And she critiques him, saying, "What thou wouldst highly, that wouldst thou holily." The alliteration of highly and holily links those two words together. She says you want to get to a high position, but you want to do it in a holy or a good way. But when she puts those two words together, she's kind of critiquing or making fun of the fact that he wants to get to the top in a good way. She thinks that holiness is wrong, so she's evil. She talks in paradoxes as well, and we know who's done that so far. The witches and Macbeth. One of the paradoxes she uses to describe her husband is when she says, "Wouldst not play false, and yet wouldst wrongly win." You don't want to cheat, and yet you want to cheat. That doesn't make any sense at all, but it's a paradox. So it aligns her with these other evil figures, the witches and Macbeth, and we see the darkness within her. So any hope that she would be this good, meek housewife is ripped apart in the first few lines of her thoughts. Then she calls on him to hurry on home so that she can pour her spirits in his ear and chastise him with her tongue. Now, this makes it sound like she's going to be the active one, doesn't it? She wants to pour her ideas into his ear. She wants to chastise him. She wants to tell him off. So she's kind of putting herself in the position above her husband. Again, that would not be expected. The husband should be the one above. The woman should be the one below in the relationship. So again, she's subverting the expectations. She also makes it sound like she's going to try and persuade him in quite a sexual way. When she talks about pouring her spirits in his ear and using her tongue, his ear, her tongue, that's potentially could be interpreted as being quite a sexual way of trying to manipulate him. And in fact, if you've seen any productions of Macbeth or watched any of the film versions of Macbeth, you'll know that the actresses playing Lady Macbeth very frequently portray her as attempting to manipulate her husband and successfully manipulating her husband through using her sexuality. Now, there's very few stage directions in Shakespeare's plays, so whether or not he intended her to behave in a sexual way is difficult to know. But lines like these are those kinds of lines which make actresses think, okay, I'm going to play the character in a sexual way. So we can think about her using her sexuality to manipulate her husband. If you remember what we said about the witches in Act 1, Scene 3, we also said that witches were supposed to be women who were sexually insatiable. So it kind of makes sense to have this evil woman also having these sexualized aspects to her, which is why women often play her in that way. So that's the end of her first speech, her first soliloquy. Remember, a soliloquy is a speech spoken by a single character on stage, talking directly to the audience, thinking their thoughts out loud when there's no other characters on stage. She's actually the first character of the play to get a soliloquy, which is really interesting because normally it's the key important characters who get the soliloquies, and very frequently it's men. Particularly in a play that you're going to see called Macbeth, you would expect it to be the man who has the tragic hero's soliloquies. But she gets the first soliloquy. So again, in dramatic terms, what she says and the stage that she's given really sets her apart from the gender expectations you would think of for a woman in those times. And she finishes that first soliloquy, and in comes a servant saying, "The king's coming here tonight, your husband's on his way home." And that really lays the scene for her second soliloquy, one of the greatest soliloquies in all of Shakespeare. The really dark night piece soliloquy here, where she calls up the evil spirits. She sees her chance. The king is coming here. Okay, I'm going to call the evil spirits to me so I can be as evil as possible so that we can carry out this plan and get the throne. That's the gist of her soliloquy. It's incredibly dark. It's incredibly powerful and controlling. I mean, look at all the imperatives she uses. Come, you spirits, make thick my blood. Come to my woman's breasts. Come, thick night. She is calling up the forces of darkness. She's not afraid at all. To a Jacobean audience, this is incredibly shocking. How can you call up the devil himself and show no fear whatsoever? They would see her as completely unhuman. And in fact, that's what she wants to be. She says, "Unsex me here," one of the most famous lines that she speaks. What does that mean? It means take away my sex, take away the fact that I am a woman. And what does she want to become instead of a woman? Well, you would think she might want to become a man, but it doesn't seem that way, because she says, "Unsex me here and fill me from the crown to the toe, top full of direst cruelty. Make thick my blood, stop up the access and passage to remorse, that no compunctuous visitings of nature shake my fell purpose." She's saying she just wants to be 100% cruel. And also, she's saying she wants thick blood so that she doesn't feel any remorse, or she doesn't have any visitings of nature, any kind of regrets or feelings about anything she's about to do. So it sounds like she wants to become something that isn't human at all. Then she says, "Come to my woman's breasts, take my milk for gall." She's saying that, again, she doesn't want to be a woman, but what does she want to turn into? Well, gall is a kind of liquid in your gallbladder, and it's known for being incredibly bitter. She wants her milk, which we talked about already in this scene, this symbol of femininity, innocence, purity, to turn to gall, to something bitter and vile. Sounds monstrous, doesn't it? She kind of wants to be this venomous creature. There's no doubt they'd be shocked, disturbed. I mean, this is a woman who's supposed to be mild, tractable, benign. Is she any of those things? No, she's controlling. She's intractable. She's evil. She's all wrong. Then she stops talking to the spirits. She starts talking to night. "Come, thick night, and pour thee in the dunnest smoke of hell, that my keen knife see not the wound it makes, nor heaven peep through the blanket of the dark to cry, hold, hold." Now, this really echoes what Macbeth was talking about in Act 1, Scene 4, when he was saying that he didn't want anybody to see, he didn't want the heavens or light or the stars to see what he was about to do. And she's really saying the same thing, isn't she? She doesn't want heaven to peep through the blanket of the dark, so she doesn't want the light up there in the heavens to look down and to see this evil deed that she's going to get up to. Also, very similarly to what Macbeth was saying, she doesn't really want to acknowledge what she's going to do. There's this same kind of psychological distancing of herself from the act that he was thinking about. She says she doesn't want her knife to see the wound that it's going to make. So in a literal sense, she's saying she wants it to be really dark, but in a metaphorical sense, what she's saying is that she wants the instrument of the act not to see the actual moment of committing the crime of murder. And that was kind of like Macbeth as well, this sense of distancing. So she's already trying to shift her personal sense of responsibility for this crime. And what makes it really terrible is that she mentions heaven at the end of this speech. You know, she doesn't want heaven to look through the blanket of the dark. And that's shocking for the Jacobean audience, because she's basically saying she knows there's a God up there watching down on her and she doesn't want him to see. So she has this concept of the moral order, but because of her ambition, she's quite happy to go against it completely. Immediately afterwards, in walks Macbeth, and now we get to see the husband and the wife together. And so we will find out whether they behave in this traditional way. Are they going to behave in the way that Jacobeans would expect, with the man being the one who's controlling and in power, and the woman being tractable and listening to him and doing what he says? And the answer is no, not at all. In fact, look at the number of lines that are spoken there, who speaks them and when they speak them. You'll see that when Macbeth comes in, Lady Macbeth carries on speaking. She speaks to him for 4 or 5 lines, and she ends the scene as well. She's the last one to speak. She says, "Leave all the rest to me." So their entire conversation is bookended by her comments. He only has 3 lines during the entire dialogue. And in fact, every time he speaks, he gets halfway through a line when she cuts him off. So that's Shakespeare showing through her interruptions that she is the dominant force here. She's also not even discussing with him whether they're going to commit this crime or not. She's basically telling him that it's going to happen and that she's going to be in control of it. So she's much more powerful than him. She does all of this in a very manipulative way. Look at the way she greets him. She calls him Great Glams. So she massages his ego before telling him what they're going to do. She uses terms of endearment like my thane to make it seem like they're close. And just as she spoke to the spirits when she used imperatives, she also speaks to her husband here with plenty of imperatives when she says to him, "Look like the time, bear welcome in your eye, look up clear, leave all the rest to me." Those sentences that begin with the verbs, they are instructions, they are imperatives. She is telling him what to do. The most famous of all those imperatives, one of her most famous lines and one of the most famous lines of the play, is when she says to him, "Look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it." Well, what does that mean? She's saying to him, you've got to look nice like a flower. You've got to look beautiful. She's even kind of interestingly, given our conversation about gender, telling him to be this kind of symbol of femininity. But be the serpent under it. Be snake-like. Of course, serpents are associated with evil, aren't they? The serpent going into the Garden of Eden. So she's saying, look fragile like a flower, look beautiful, but be evil underneath it. That is a great quotation to remember whenever you want to talk about duplicity in this play. You know, the idea of looking fair but being foul underneath those witches' words, fair is foul and foul is fair. She summarises that concept quite brilliantly here, telling her husband what to do and also saying, don't be like a book where everyone can read what you're thinking. Cover up your true thoughts. So she's giving him these instructions about how to be deceptive, how to be duplicitous. She puts him at ease. She says he's got to put this night's great business into my dispatch. So don't worry, I'll take care of it all. He's not completely sure because he says we will speak further, but she cuts him off again. No, we're not going to talk about this further. We're just going to do it, she says. So she's completely in control, even when he tries to put the brakes on. So again, there's no space for his doubt in her duplicitous and scheming plan. So here she is, Lady Macbeth. By the end of the scene, we have well and truly realised that this is not a woman who fits with the Jacobean stereotype of a good, passive housewife. She's as controlling with her husband as she is with the spirits. She seems just about the most powerful figure in the play so far. It's incredible the dominance she has over the human and apparently the supernatural realm, although of course later on we will see all of this unravel. But Shakespeare starts her out as this figure of complete control and power. And really what Shakespeare seems to be showing us through Lady Macbeth is how disturbing a woman can be when she is so powerful, so manipulative. Which naturally leads to the question, is this play and this portrayal of Lady Macbeth sexist? Is Shakespeare portraying a powerful woman as a bad thing? That's a question that students often ask. Hang on a minute, this is a bit sexist here. Lady Macbeth, she's a powerful woman, but she's really evil. He's kind of saying that women shouldn't be powerful. I'm not sure about that argument. I think he's saying that women shouldn't be evil, but he equally, through the character of Macbeth, says that men shouldn't be evil as well. And as I've said in one of my other videos about Macbeth, Shakespeare very often makes his female characters more powerful, more mentally astute than the male characters. And we see in the comedies how this actually turns out for the better, and they manipulate the men in a hilarious way so that everything turns out well and everyone gets what they want at the end because of a female figure. But in this play, he is showing the darker side of somebody who's really powerful, really manipulative. And he does that through the character of Lady Macbeth. If anything, it's showing the weakness of men more than the danger of a powerful woman. It's showing how only a woman can really be so powerful as to be able to control someone else in that way. So I don't think it's sexist. But I do think it's one of the great opening scenes for a female character in all of drama.